Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Automotive Cybersecurity series. Today, we're covering one of the most fundamental concepts in ISO SAE 21434, the difference between damage scenarios and threat scenarios. This is a critical distinction that many people get confused about, but once you understand it, the entire TARA process becomes much clearer. I'm bringing you insights from over 20 years in automotive cybersecurity, so let's dive in. Let's start with the formal definitions from ISO SAE 21434. First, damage scenario. A damage scenario describes the harm or adverse consequences that occur to road users when a cyber attack succeeds. The key here is that it focuses on what harm happens and who is affected. We're looking at the victim's experience. Second, threat scenario. A threat scenario describes the potential attack method that could compromise the cybersecurity properties of an asset. This focuses on how an attack happens and what gets compromised. We're looking at the attacker's actions. Notice the fundamental difference. One is about consequences, the other is about attack methods. Let's break down the 5 key differences in detail. Focus damage scenarios. Focus on consequences and harm. What bad thing actually happens? Threat scenarios focus on the attack method, how the attacker succeeds. Perspective damage takes the victim's view, the road user's experience. Threat takes the attacker's view, the hacker's actions. Timing damage scenarios describe what happens after a successful attack. Threat scenarios describe what happens during the attack execution. Purpose. We assess damage for impact. How severe is the harm? We assess threats for vulnerability identification. How easy is the attack? Output damage scenarios produce impact ratings in 4 categories: safety, financial, operational, and privacy, rated as severe, major, moderate, or negligible. Threat scenarios produce feasibility ratings: high, medium, low, or very low. Let me give you a simple analogy to make this crystal clear. Think of a house burglary. The threat scenario is burglar breaks window with crowbar at night. This describes who attacks, the burglar, how they attack, with a crowbar, and when, at night. The damage scenario is family loses $5,000 TV and feels unsafe at home. This describes what is lost, the TV and sense of safety, W2 is harmed, the family, and how bad it is, $5,000 plus psychological trauma. Here's the key insight. Both are needed for complete risk assessment. The threat scenario tells us how likely the attack is. That's feasibility. The damage scenario tells us how bad the consequences are. That's impact. And remember, risk equals likelihood times impact. You need both pieces. Now let's look at what the standard actually requires. For damage scenarios, Clause 15.3 has several requirements. RQ 1501 says damage scenarios shall be identified. RQ 1502 requires identifying assets with cybersecurity properties. RQ 1504 mandates impact assessment in all 4 categories: safety, financial, operational, and privacy. RQ 15.05 specifies the rating levels, and RQ 15.06 requires that safety ratings come from ISO 26262. The work products are WP 1501 for damage scenarios, and WP 1504 for impact ratings. For threat scenarios, Clause 15.4 requires that threat scenarios reference assets and their compromised properties and include the cause of compromise. Clause 15.6 requires attack path analysis, and 15.7 requires feasibility rating. Work products are WP 15.03 for threat scenarios and WP 15.06 for attack feasibility ratings. And here's a critical note from the standard. Note 3 explicitly states that a damage scenario can correspond to multiple threat scenarios, and a threat scenario can lead to multiple damage scenarios. This is a many-to-many relationship. Let's see how these fit into the overall TARA process. We have 8 steps. Steps 1 through 3 are damage-related: asset identification, damage scenario creation, and impact rating. These are shown in red. Steps 4 through 6 are threat-related: threat scenario identification, attack path analysis, and feasibility rating. These are shown in blue. Step 7 combines both: risk determination, shown in yellow. This is where we multiply feasibility times impact to get risk values from 1 to 5. Finally, step 8 is risk treatment decision in green, where we decide what to do about the risks. Notice how damage and threat analysis happen in parallel and then come together for risk calculation. From both ISO SAE 21434 and real automotive practice, we see three common patterns. Pattern 1. One threat leads to multiple damages. For example, an attacker spoofs CAN messages to the brake ECU. This single threat causes three different damage scenarios. Brakes fail, causing collision with severe safety impact. Vehicle is immobilized and unable to drive with major operational impact. And repair costs $8,000 with moderate financial impact. Pattern 2. Multiple threats lead to one damage. The damage is driver loses visibility at night, leading to collision. But this can happen three different ways. Threat 1 is attacker sends a turn-off command, which is an integrity violation. Threat 2 is a DOS attack overwhelms the headlamp ECU, which is an availability violation. Threat 3 is malicious firmware disables the lamps, which is both integrity and availability violation. Pattern 3. Threat chain leads to cascading damages. Remote exploit of telematics gives access to internal CAN, which allows compromising multiple ECUs. This causes primary damage of privacy breach, secondary damage of vehicle control loss, and tertiary damage of collision. These patterns appear constantly in real Terra work. Let's walk through a complete real-world example with the Autonomous Emergency Braking System. Our asset is the AEB ECU with high importance for both integrity and availability properties. The threat scenario is attacker compromises integrity of CAN messages sent to AEB ECU. The attack path has three steps. First, attacker gains network access via a compromised infotainment system. Second, they inject false sensor data on the CAN bus. Third, the AEB receives no obstacle detected when an obstacle is actually present. The feasibility rating is medium because this requires specialist knowledge plus equipment. The damage scenario is AEB fails to activate during imminent collision at highway speed. Now the impact assessment. Safety is severe. S3 classification, life-threatening collision with potential fatalities. Financial is major. $50,000 to $150,000, including vehicle loss, medical costs, and liability. Operational is severe. Complete loss of a critical safety function when it's most needed. Privacy is negligible. No personal data is exposed in this scenario. This is exactly how you document both scenarios in practice. Let's look at a different example where privacy is the main concern. For the infotainment system, the threat scenario is remote attacker exploits Wi-Fi vulnerability to access stored user data. The attack path is exploit known Wi-Fi bug, gain shell access, extract user database. Feasibility is high because public exploits are available. The damage scenario is personal data stolen, including contact list with 200 entries, GPS location history for 6 months, Bluetooth device records, and Wi-Fi passwords. Impact assessment safety is negligible, no physical harm. Financial is moderate. Identity theft risk. Operational is negligible. The system still works. But privacy is major because sensitive personally identifiable information is exposed. Now the risk calculation. Feasibility high, which is 4 out of 5, times impact major, which is 3 out of 5, equals risk value 4 out of 5, high risk. The risk treatment decision is to reduce risk by implementing input validation, security patches, and data encryption, with penetration testing required for verification. Let me share 6 best practices from 20 years in the field. First, start with damages. Identify damage scenarios. First, then work backwards to threats. This focuses on what matters. Protecting users. Second, use STRIDE for threats. Spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. This gives you systematic threat identification. Third, link them explicitly. Every threat must connect to at least one damage scenario. This avoids theoretical threats with no real impact. Fourth, document the connection. Create a traceability matrix showing asset leads to threat leads to damage. This enables audits and reviews. Fifth, update regularly. Review when the design changes or new vulnerabilities emerge. The risk landscape evolves constantly. Sixth, involve experts. Use safety engineers for damage scenarios and security experts for threat scenarios. Different expertise is needed for each. Let's summarize the key points. Damage scenario equals consequences. What harm occurs? Threat scenario equals attack method. How the attacker succeeds. Both are mandatory in ISO SAE 21434 TARA. One threat can cause multiple damages and vice versa. It's a many-to-many relationship. Damage produces impact rating in safety, financial, operational, privacy categories. Threat produces feasibility rating. Risk equals feasibility times impact. Always link threats to damages explicitly and use systematic approaches. STRIDE for threats, CIA for properties. Master both concepts for complete automotive cybersecurity. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.